But there's this moment in the story of John, in John chapter 21, where John is telling this story, or the one whom Jesus loved, okay? And he's telling this story from his vantage point, okay? And so we got to understand this. And so he's looking at this story, he's looking at this moment of Peter's redemption, he's looking at all this, and he starts it with these words. He says, later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. And what? This is how it happened. Simon, and he explained all the guys that were there, right? I could explain to you all the guys that were there that night. I can tell you who was in the car, who was doing most of the damage, who was the one going, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this. That was me. Because I'm the cautious one of the group, I always have been. But I won't do that because I don't want to get other people in trouble. Or it's long past. It was like our junior year, so that's too long ago. Okay? But he simply says this. He says, Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. How many I'm going with him? Right? Dan, I know you. Todd, I know you both would be like, I'm going fishing. Okay? And so he went off. He was doing the thing that he always has done. Like something that was really familiar. And he said, this is what Peter was doing. And it says that the rest of the disciples made it very clear. We'll come too, they said. So they went out into the boat, but they caught nothing all night. If you want a fishing trip where you'll catch nothing, just take CJ along with you. Because it's like they just avoid me, okay? And I'm not joking. I've said this to multiple people that have asked me to go on fishing trips. I'm like, why waste my money? I don't need to go, because here's what happens. I get on the boat, they hand me the pole, and nothing happens. And I have proof of this. Because I went deep sea fishing on my birthday because someone made me do this one year. And they're like, oh, we'll pay for you. It's going to be good, whatever. And it was horrible, right? It was cold out. We didn't even get to go out in the deep part of the deep sea fishing thing. We had to fish in the little inlet there and Outer Banks. Can you remember that? And so Zeke and me and a couple other people went. And so it was my turn. We were fishing. The guy's like, yeah, you'll get this. We'll probably catch some of this. And we caught jack squat, okay? We caught a little shark about this big. That was cool. We caught another little stingray thing about this big. But CJ caught nothing. And I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there, and the guy's like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm like, I am, okay? The fish must know I don't really want to catch them, so they're like, why give them the excitement? I don't know. And so, I'm sitting there, and I literally take the pole, and I go, I'm done. Literally hand it to them. They put their hands on it, and all of a sudden, proof that CJ doesn't go fishing, okay? But this is that moment. They're in the boat, there's nothing. And these aren't amateur fishermen, right? This is what they made their living on before Jesus. So they kind of know the waters, they kind of know the different patterns of the tides, they know all these things. If you're going to go fishing with them, they're the people you're going to pay because they're going to be able to find you what you're looking for. And so we're not talking, like I said, about amateurs. We're not talking about somebody that just rented a boat, went out and goes, hey, maybe we'll just drop something in here, right? These are people that knew what they were doing. But it says that they went out and they caught absolutely what? Nothing. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach. But the disciples couldn't see who he was. And he called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? I think this is kind of a dig. This is my personal thing. You thought you could go back to doing that. You thought you were the greatest at that, and you caught nothing, right? And so Jesus is sitting on the shore, and he's kind of, I think, taunting them at this point. And they replied, no. And then he said this. He said, throw your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some. So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Okay. John's telling you, this is how it happened. They didn't recognize Jesus, they didn't even know it was Jesus on the shore. In a moment they do, they begin to understand, they hear his voice, and they begin to see this, and this is how it proceeds. Let me just go this. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, which was John, the one telling the story, then the disciple Jesus loved, said to Peter, it's what? It's the Lord. And so in that moment, everything began to compute a little bit. And if we go into the story, we see that Simon then jumps into the water, gets to shore, and we see the part which we talked about last week. But there was something this week that I had to sit on, and I don't know what for, but I'm trusting that God is going to bring this to light in this moment. But he says, this is what happened. Without him, without his word, they couldn't do anything. I think there was a little lesson in which he was trying to teach the disciples at this point, because there's a moment here shortly after this where he sends into heaven, and now they really have to obey his word. Like if they're really going to be who like Jesus has called them to be, then they've got to listen to him. And so this little step of, they were fishing over here, and he said, take it up and throw it on the right-hand side, and they begin to catch fish. They begin to do what he said to do. Now, they could have argued back and forth, who are you? No, we're not going to do that. We've already done that probably. We've been going back and forth. We've done everything we know to do. And at the moment, Jesus is going, nope, throw it on the right-hand side. We're just waiting to see if you're going to obey, right? And so they did it. And what happened? They got more than they could expect. I mean, they couldn't even get it in. This question came up this week as I thought through this. It's a simple question. What are you doing now that is not producing the expected result? What do you keep doing and thinking you're going to get this is one of those moments where it's like you continue to do the thing you know you shouldn't do, and you think you're going to get a different result. Like I think someone said that's the definition of stupidity. Insanity. Okay, there we go. I like stupidity better. Anyways, you look at it and you go, yeah, if you just keep doing the same thing the same way, thinking you're going to get the same results, and you're getting a different result. You are. And Jesus is just simply going, hey, there's a different way. And the way is, if you just listen to my voice and you do what I say, you're going to bring in more than you even can fathom. I feel like we're at this point in life. For me, life and ministry and family and even with the church, I feel like we're at this point where it's like God's preparing for something. And I heard a couple different, prayers towards that, but I truly believe that we're standing looking at the harvest right now. This is the picture in which I have. We can see it. We know it's there. We know right now that the truth is way clearer because the lies are so blatantly lies. There's definitely some gap. It's not like it's just slightly off. It's no, it's way over here and it's way over here. And the church is just sitting here going, okay, is this really it? Should we really do what Jesus says is to pray to the Lord of the harvest that he sends his laborers into the fields? And he's waiting for his church to really, truly take him at his word and go, no, it's there. It's ready for you. Are you doing anything? Are you listening to my word? Because the little example in which we see from this fishing boat is simply this. If Jesus says cast the net into the right side, then we cast the net to the right side because we know that he keeps his word. They did it in faith. Think about this for a minute. When that words came from the shore, they didn't even recognize that it was Jesus at that moment. They just said, hey, well, we've been out here all night. That's not working, so let's do this. And in the end, they realized, no, that's Jesus, the Lord. The one who a few days ago was dead and now is alive. And so it shouldn't be that hard to trust him. Because at one point he's telling us, hey, I'm gonna die on the cross and I'm going to rise again on the third day, and then I'm going to be with you for a short season, and then I'm going to ascend into heaven. And up to this point, he was spot on. So not really hard to believe. But I think you and I have had moments like that. They're not as drastic as this. I think you have moments where you've experienced God in a way, and you've obeyed him in times. And you know, hey, this was what happened when I actually cast my net to the right side of the boat. This is what happened when I actually said yes. I want my life to be marked by the yeses in my life. When it's all said and done, going to these funerals this week, what I want to be recounted about my life is the different times in which we said yes to God, and this was what happened when we said yes to God. And I watched it over and over in both of these funerals as they shared these different stories and these different opportunities and these doors that God opened, and they walked through, and we got to just sit there and go, wow. God, let me have that faith. I mean, this week I started thinking about this as you go throughout Scripture. Like, I was really glad, like, that Abraham said no, or he said yes to, like, doing what the Lord told him to do, even though it didn't make any sense. I'm supposed to take my son up to the hill and sacrifice him, but God's going to provide at the end. Yeah, like, I'm glad that Abraham didn't say no. That Abraham had faith to go that far. Can you imagine just for a minute? Like, your kid, who's an older teenage kid, is laying on this altar, and he's like, sorry, son, this is what the Lord told me to do. And he's got a knife up here, and then all of a sudden, at the last second, there's a ram caught in the thicket. And God provided. Like, I'm really glad that he said yes, even though it made no sense. I'm really glad that Moses didn't say no when he's standing in front of the burning bush, and God says, you're going to go to my people, you're going to go to Pharaoh, and you're going to tell him, let my people go, and you're going to lead them out. I'm really glad Moses said yes. I'm really glad that Rahab, the prostitute, didn't say, no, I don't hide spies. Because as you look at the lineage of Jesus, who's in the middle of the lineage of Jesus? Rahab. You begin to look at all these different stories. I'm glad that David that day didn't go, hey, you know what? Don't like my brothers anyways. They don't really like me. I'm not going to take them this cheese tray. And David walks down to the front lines, and he ends up in this battle against Goliath. And he says yes. And the reason why he can say yes is because he can look at it and go, I'm not the one that's going to win this battle. The Lord is. And everybody wanted to pile it on David. Oh, look what David did. Yeah, look at David. And David's like, no, it wasn't me. It was the Lord. Like, the Lord's the only one that can take that rock and speed it up to a speed that could kill the giant. None of it makes sense. They had all the weapons. They had all the armor. They had everything. But it was a little shepherd boy with a little sling and some stones. I'm really glad that Jesus didn't say, no, I don't do crosses. But he said yes over and over and over again. Think about this. How many of us maybe are even in this place because someone said yes to what God asked them to do? Some of you are products even of our yes. Like our yes to move from a place in Wisconsin to Adrian. And some of you, like, I'm thinking of Rod and Holly right now. I don't know where they're at, if they're even in here. Holly's way up there. Rod's probably backsliding somewhere in the back hallway somewhere. Like, they came to Christ because of a little baseball team. Right? A little baseball team that our sons were on together. And what happens if we don't say yes back here? I don't know. God can do whatever he wants, but God chose to use our story to bring us to this place, back to the town I grew up in, the place that my wife didn't want to come back to, the place I said when I left this place, like, I am never coming back here. Said everybody that's in Adrian, right? Some of you that didn't leave, you're way stronger than I, okay? But the yes. And this is where this is. It's like, they said yes to going, okay, yeah, I know that we haven't caught anything. We're probably exhausted at this moment. Like, this doesn't make any sense, but okay, we'll go and do this. And they listened to his voice. So coming back to this question, what are you doing right now that is not producing the expected result? Another story I want to read is this, John 9. There's this moment where Jesus meets this blind man. It says that him and the disciples were going along, and they were going through a town and a village, and they came across this blind man. And it says he was blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? You know, good question. You know, most of the time in that culture, they believe that if there was somebody that was deformed or disabled in some different way, they would look at it and go, well, who sinned? And so Jesus gives them an answer. I don't know if it was what they were expecting, but he says this, neither this man nor his parents sinned. And so they're sitting there going, well, what? Why is he the way he is then? Right? And he says this. He says, but this happened, okay? But this happened so that the what? Works of God might be displayed in him. The works of God are on display in each and every one of our lives. Now the question is, are we allowing God to use it? Because what's interesting about this story and how this story changes here in the next couple minutes is simply this, like, even though Jesus, well, let's continue this and then I'll come back to it. As long as it was day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. And while I'm in this world, I am the light of this world. He continues on, he says, after saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with his saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Okay? So here's the interesting part about this as well. This wasn't a normal thing that Jesus did. Jesus didn't go, hey, this is how I heal people's eyes. You're right? He didn't do that. He did this to this guy, for this guy. And what's interesting is I'd feel a little gypped because it's like, yeah, I've heard the stories of you healing other people and you didn't have to spit, right? You just said, hey, be healed, pick up your mat and go. Like, Jesus, why couldn't you just do it that way? And sometimes we expect the thing that God's doing in us to be like other people, and that's not often how God works. We try to make it routine. We try to make it a formula or a process, and God's going, no, if you try to trap me into a formula, you're going to find that I don't fit the formula most of the time. And so he's doing it different. And then he didn't stop there. He didn't just go, hey, I put the mud on your eyes. No, he says, now go. Go to this pool. And as you go to this pool, I'm washing it. And when he washed, he says he came out and he came home what? Seeing. Now here's the interesting part. As you continue into the story, guess what happens? This just mind boggles me. Because as he goes back home and as he gets among the people of which he knew and he's grown up with and all, I mean, these are people that are close to him, not people that are just like, oh, we saw him at one time. Like, they begin to question whether he could really see or not. And not only that, they begin to question if he was really ever truly blind. Can you imagine that? Like, so much so that they begin to question and basically accuse his parents of lying. No, he could see. He partially see. You know, he could see shadows and do other stuff. And they're like, no, he's blind from birth. And then they ask this simple question. Okay, if you really were healed, then who's the man that healed you? He's like, I don't know, it was just this man. He put this mud patch on my eye, man, I have spit and some dirt, and then he told me to go do this, and so I did this, and all I know is that I was once blind, and now what? Now I see. That's each and every one of our stories. Each and every one of us. We were once blind, and now we can see. Not physically blind, but spiritually. And God is wanting to open up our eyes to see, right, all the things that He's doing in our midst. And He's wanting other people to see what He's been doing in your life. Don't just continue to do life the normal, everyday way that you've been doing it. Open up your life and go, God, what do you want to do? How do you want to use me? What do you want to do through me? Because here's the thing that we're seeing. As we look through this story, we see, finally, it comes to this point where they begin to believe. And Jesus comes to him, and then he knows it was Jesus who did this. But what we want to focus in on is simply this. He obeyed what? Jesus' words. He didn't walk around going, oh, Jesus' spit and mud is enough. Some of us do that. We're okay walking around with muddy faces and muddy eyes, and we're like, his spit is glorious, right? Jesus goes, no, now that you've done this, go to this pool, this specific one, and wash your face, wash your eyes right there. And it's in the obedience to his word that he what? He begins to see. So I want to ask you another question. How is God wanting to display the works of God through your life? How does he want to do it? What is he asking you to do? Because he's always speaking. Are we willing to listen? You see, what's interesting, I think all of us remember back to 2020 when all this kind of stuff with COVID hit the fan, right? And none of us was really certain about what was going to happen. You know, the news, all this stuff was like people are dying everywhere, like just stay in your homes, do all these things. What's the 2 weeks to, do you remember that? I don't know what it was, but 2 weeks to slow the spread. There we go, right? And so we're like, okay, 2 weeks. And then like 2 years later, we're like, they say 2 weeks or 2 years? Okay, like you begin to look at this. But I remember when this all happened, it was one of those moments where God just totally like slapped me upside the head. Because at that moment I was terrified. I was scared. I'm just like, hey, at this point, we're like 4 years into this. Like we're not there. Like we're it's gonna be struggle bus at this point to kind of do and change and like God, I don't even know if God, in case you didn't know, I'll let you know, I don't know if we'll make it. You know, like God's sitting there just laughing, you know, because He knows. And I honestly, I was sitting there going, man, I truly don't know if we can weather this. Like financially, just with people, with all these different things. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of things that, like if you go back into my story and you begin to look at the different times I said yes to different things, I would always wonder, why am I doing these things? Well, I can tell you that when it came to COVID, there was a lot of things I said yes to that I didn't realize what I was saying yes to, that God was preparing me for this time. Right? And what I began to realize was something that I read not too long into that time. But it was in Isaiah 55, and this is where God really bought this. And He simply says this, the Lord speaking through Isaiah, says, seek the Lord while He can be found. Call on Him now while He's what? There. It's kind of what we did this morning. Like we're going, hey, God's here. Let's lean into this. Let's begin to pray into this. And so God hears the prayer. God, like, make us come alive again. Breathe into these dry bones. God, we're empty. We need, like, and He hears those prayers. And He's like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And so seek Him while the Lord can be found. Call on Him while He's near. And this is where it got really personal. Let the wicked change their ways and banish the very thought of doing wrong. Let them turn to the Lord that they may have mercy on them. Yes, turn to our God, for He forgives what? Generously. And here's where things really, well, this is where it's like the right hook, right? My thoughts are nothing like your thoughts. Can we say amen? Because I'm so glad His thoughts are not like my thoughts. And His ways are not like my ways. Because let me tell you something, I can tell God exactly how and which way this should go and how this should work out and all these different things. But I was standing at that moment going, God, there's not a way. Like, I physically don't know how this is going to happen. Like, I don't know how we're going to transition. I don't know how this is going to go. And God's going, isn't it good that your thoughts are not my thoughts and my ways aren't your ways? And in that moment, I had to have a moment of repentance. And thank God that He forgives what? Generously. When I say that the Lord is patient, I've experienced the Lord's patience because I've denied and I've walked away and I've done things that, you know, God asked me to do. I said, no, not how. I don't have it in me to do it. And yet God patiently just waits. And then there comes a moment when you wake up finally and you begin to go, oh. There was this interesting moment when we lived in Wisconsin, and we were talking about just God's presence and His nearness and obedience, right? Like obeying God. And there was a guy that was sitting in one of our groups, and he just said, I just can't feel God anymore. And someone spoke up and said these one things, and I'll never forget it. He's like, when's the last time God asked you to do something and you didn't do it? He's right there waiting for you. I was like, whoa. But think about this for a minute. He's wanting you to do it. He's not changing His mind. And so if you're in this place where you're like, I don't know what God's wanting me to do. like, well, when's the last time he spoke and what was he telling you to do? Maybe go back to that space and see if he's still there waiting for you. Because he might just waiting for you to go, okay, I'll do that now. And thank God, he forgives generously. Verse 9 continues on this way. He says, for just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. The rain and the snow come down from heavens, and they stay on the ground to water the earth. Now, that's the interesting thing. When he talks about your thoughts and my ways and all these things, and then immediately after this, he says, the rain and the snow come, they fall down from the heavens, they do all this stuff. And like for us, we're just like, yeah, that's normal. Like we don't even look at it. We're like, we hate snow these months. We'd rather have the sun, but we need water too. And and so we kind of just don't even think about it. But God has a purpose and plan in every drop that falls from the sky. And he says there's a purpose for it. And Isaiah uses this to help us understand because he says this, they cause the grain to grow, producing seed for the farmer and bread for the what? There's a purpose for it. And this is what I want us to grab today. He says this, it is the same with my word. I send it out, and it what? You got to hear this one. It always produces fruit. His word always produces what he says it will. It always produces fruit. It will accomplish all that I want it to, and it will prosper everywhere what I send it. You see, we've got to stop thinking we know everything because we don't. His way is not my way. His thoughts are not my thoughts. Now, sometimes they are. Sometimes I'm in alignment, and sometimes I can see things clearly, but often, majority of the time, I'm just kind of at this point of like, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know what you're going to do, God. I kind of get fearful, and I begin to kind of go away, and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to live in that place. And oh, wait, God, you said your word always produces fruit, and so like I want to live in that space, not over here where it's like I'm choking the thing to death because I don't know if it's working, and I'm trying to do all the work to try to make sure it works, and God's going, whoa, calm down. Like, just rest. Abide. That's the actual word, abide. Don't move from this place. Because this is the place where you're going to produce. And it starts with this abiding, remaining connected. You see, last question I really want to ask you today is simply this. What will the story, what would the story be that you and I get to tell? What will the story be? I thought about this because as we're heading into all the stuff that's happening, like there's really this pull back to, like, let's get back to the basics. Like, it's not about some great performance. It's not about some great message. It's about Jesus. And so we want to lean back in. We want to go back to the basics. And I was taught this when I was younger, which I am very grateful for the Sunday school teachers and the people that I had in my life that really discipled me. But they said when things kind of get out of balance and you kind of don't know where to go, like, go back to the basics. And the basic of basics is Jesus and the cross and the resurrection, right? That's the basics. And Jesus says, prayer is one of those basics. Getting in his word is one of those basics. And it's like we need to start coming together, and the biggest thing we need to start doing is praying together. In 2 weeks, we're going to start a series that we're calling In Jesus' Name. And we're going to talk about prayer in different ways and different kinds of different prayer that God asks us to pray and how he asks us to pray and all this stuff. But next week, what we're going to do, and this is what I'm going to invite you back to, next week, we're going to start off this whole thing by I want to share with you where everything's at right now. It's kind of, some people call it like a vision thing, I guess, vision. The vision's pretty simple. Like, we just want to do what Jesus tells us to do. And so we're in a building thing because Jesus told us to do a building thing. And so when Jesus tells me to do a building thing, guess what I'm going to do? Building thing. Is that the way that God's going to do it? No, but he's asking us to step into this right now. But here's the thing. The building's great, but unless we're unified in prayer, none of that matters. Like, unless we're prepared for the harvest, unless we're praying in those things, like we're missing it. And I want to share with you just a little bit, and this is how my thoughts are broke up a little bit, okay? In 2020, I'm sitting there going, God, I don't know how we're going to make it, okay? When 2020 started, I think, if I'm not wrong, we had about $26,000 in the bank. You're like, oh, that's pretty good. But when you consider, like, employees, and you consider that anything that we have comes from gifts that you guys decide to go, hey, this is the Lord's, I'm going to give back to him, and this is my tithe, my offerings, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be obedient in that. That's the only way we do what we do. That's it. Like, we don't have any other fundraising things. CJ's not out doing, like, nightclub singing or anything like that and making money. Like, just not happening, right? Some of you found that funny, some of you didn't. Okay. But that's the way it is. And so, like, I'm literally sitting there going, man, God, I don't know how that thing continues when this happens. But I can tell you something. God showed up. And showed up in a very, very big way. Because within the next couple of years that followed, like, we found ourselves going, okay, God, we're going to begin to believe you, or believe that, God, you want to give us this building, meaning the Elder Beerman thing. And so we as a staff and elders begin to pray. And the prayer we started praying is, God, give it to us debt-free. Like, debt-free. And I can tell you this, as of right now, like, we are there. But from this point forward, we've got to start leaning into some other financial things, potentially. It depends on what God's going to do. And we just keep going, okay, God, you've been faithful to provide, so when we need this, guess what's there? It's there. And so I wanted to show you this, because someone told me, I think at some point you just need to lay this out so people understand this, okay? Here we go. This is currently, maybe. Hey, Jordan, will you hit that slide? It says currently. For some reason, my thing won't work. Maybe. There we go. Currently, this is where we're at in our bank account. At the beginning of 2023, that was our bank account. This is, anybody could ask this anytime you want, right? Giving that's been specifically earmarked for the project is about $16,500. The total for the Commons as of today is $253,410. That's what we spent to date. We've done no fundraising. We've done no pleading for anything. We've just, that's the faithfulness of God, and that's the faithfulness of each and every one of us to go, this isn't mine, it's God's. And the majority of that, what you got to understand, is from our tithes and offerings that come in every week. So we budget on a monthly basis for our tithes and offerings. Go to the next thing. Our budget right now for each month is $22,500. Now our monthly budget expenses average between $1,500 and $1,700 or $17,000. We've done a really good job of kind of saving and kind of prioritizing, because we knew, like, this is where God's leading us, this is what we do, so we need to kind of be strategic, we kind of need to be smart in what we're doing, and so we don't go do crazy things, because, like, at this point, we know this is where our focus needs to be, and we're going, okay, God, you're going to continue to provide, and he does. This is the thing. Like, what we begin to see is, we went to, on April 11th of this year, we went into that building when we closed on the Commons over at the mall, and we walked in that day with a $150,000 check, which was after our deposits and after some of the other commitments that we made, where we ended up purchasing the whole thing for $200,000. And then over this time, we have now spent an extra almost, I think it's a little bit more than 238, actually, or no, it's 253. So that is right. That's our wall. Our wall is, like, all the mason stuff is done. Like, it's done. So now there's a team of guys, and hopefully you'll join us in this, or women, if you're good with, like, drywall and all that stuff. We're not going gender specific, whatever here, okay? So, like, I don't know how to say it. Anyways, if you're good with a tool or a hammer, like, go ahead, okay? But so now we're at this space where we're kind of beginning to chunk into this, because the amount that we're having to put out each month is a little bit more than what we're even saving each month after our expenses, right? And so we begin to kind of dwindle down. But what's amazing about this is this, and this is what I wanted you to see, and this is why I was asking, this is why I'm sharing all this. is because I want you to see the faithfulness of God. The faithfulness of God, who had a pastor that on March of 2020 was sitting there, God, I don't know if we're going to make it, to God 4 years later going, how you like that? Right? And here's the thing, and this is the thing I can't get over yet, okay? And this is where I need every one of us to begin to pray. God has promised, and God has spoken these words very clearly, and I don't fully know what they mean yet. But God is saying, I'm going to do this different than you know. I don't know what that looks like. I'm hoping that there's just something that God goes, here's a big check, but I don't think it's even going to be that. I don't know what God is going to do, but I want to continue to trust Him, and I want to continue to be faithful and obedient in it. Now, here's the thing. Even as all this is going on, we just continue to do ministry. We continue to support, like Alyssa that went out. We did the food thing. We've done other different supports on a monthly basis. Like, we're not like sitting here going, no, we can't do this, can't do that. Like, we're supporting other things along the way in this. And God just continues to provide. And here's what I want to say to you. I don't want to make this about money. I don't want this to end with money. So if you can get off that slide, just go back to this is how it happened slide, if you can do that. I can't wait for each and every one of us to begin to tell the story of this is how it happened. This is how it happened that my neighbor showed up one Sunday. This is how it happened. I was in my backyard, and across the fence, I had one of those Tim Allen moments with the neighbor in Home Improvement, and he's got, no, sorry. But we begin to talk. And there might be a moment that they're struggling with something. And all of a sudden, God puts you in this moment, right, where you can either be obedient to kind of share your faith and to share the only thing you know that works, which is Jesus. And from that moment, this is how it happened. And it happened because Jesus ordained this moment here on this earth in this minute, hours, days, months, chronos time for a God moment to happen. And in that God moment, God showed up in a powerful way, and my neighbor's no longer the same. Or maybe it's us just standing up and going, no, I want to begin to lead a group. I want to begin to love on young people. I want to begin to invest in the next generation. And it's in that obedience that God's saying, no, I need you to go do this because nobody else is doing it. I need you to do this. That you begin to see God's hand move in and through your life, and you begin to see what He begins to do with those kids, those people that He's put around you. Because let me just say this. This is not about the physical, even the money, monetary parts. This is about the physical serving. This is about giving in that way as well. Because God has gifted and equipped each and every one of us to do what it is He's called us to do. And so today, I've said this before. I don't want this to be at the month of money. I've avoided sharing this, but we're at the point where I need to share it so that, number one, you can praise God all the way out these doors and go, look how faithful and how good God has been. That, oh, by the way, we own a property that's valued by the insurance company at $6 million. That other people have told me that even to build that building on that piece of property is probably $12 million plus. Am I right in that, Dan? Yeah. The land alone, okay, the land alone is right around $1 million for the property. Not us. God. Right? And so here's what I want you to see. What God is even doing there, He can do in every little circumstance, in every situation of your life. You just have to trust Him. And what if we came together now, we begin to pray in a way that says, God, what are you speaking? What are you saying? What do you want to do? I want that to be a place where God's presence just dwells. When we show up, His manifest presence is like right there waiting for us. Like He's saying, come on, let's go. I said this last week. I want it to be a place where people come expecting just to play and hang out, and they end up meeting Jesus. Like it's just a tool. That's all it is. But here's what I want to say to you. Like each and every one of us have a part in this. We've done this series called Marked. And the reason why we've called it Marked is this. We believe that transformation, the definition of transformation is simply this, a marked change. Marked change. So we talked about the first week. Team, if you want to come. I've been going way over lately. But that's okay. Okay? The first week we talked about moments. And we talked about what if we just surrendered and we allowed God to show up in each and every moment of our life. The second part was we talked about his presence. We said nothing else matters. David said, this is my priority, to find a place where God can dwell. And then last week we talked about commitment. And we said commitment, man, it's what God's asking you and I to do. And it comes out of this commitment to making this the priority. And so we're going to have to rearrange some things. We're going to have to do some things. There's a lot of things that as we go into this and as you begin to open your life up to what God is asking you to do, there's some things you're going to say no to. Because can I say this as well? As grateful as I am with all the yeses and all the people that said yes to different things, I'm also equally grateful that people said no to other things. Because in order for you to say yes to something, oftentimes you have to say no to the other thing. The other thing might be a really good thing. But is it the God thing? That's what we're asking. And so today basically comes down to this. I hope that our story becomes that this is how it happened. And I believe, which we're going to talk about next week, it's going to happen little by little. And I hope that as we come together next week, we're going to come with anticipation to go, God, show us what you want to show us. Help us to see. May it be like the report of those 2 spies that came back and said, hey, we saw all these things, and we got to go take the land. Help it not to be about the other 8 that didn't come back with a plan, right? But let's move, and let's see what God wants to do. As we just say, God, here we are. We're willing. Because can I share with you one little thing? You're like, no, just end. Okay. We sat at this conference, Bill and Rick and Caleb and I. We sat at this conference a few months ago now in Atlanta, in multi-use church. And so they gave you different ideas about how to use your facility and help it make money so that you can fund kingdom projects and things like that. And we feel like that's something which God's kind of stirring as well, and we're trying to lean into that, figure out what that is completely. But it was amazing to me because one of the things they were trying to say, it was really a sales pitch, to be honest with you, but thank God didn't show me that. But here's what it came down to, is what ways can you use your facility? And one of the things they said is this. They said, do you know that the public school system, if your kid rides the bus, they will drop your kid off wherever they tell you to drop them off. That's kind of weird nowadays, right? But if we say, hey, my kid is at Madison and I want to be dropped off, I want to be dropped off at the Commons. And so now all of a sudden, I think youth group looks a little different. Why? Because kids get a free ride from the public school right to the church. And maybe youth group looks a little different because it happens right after school. And you're like, I know there's sports and all this stuff, but not every kid plays sports. Right? And let me say this again. And they get dropped off for free, right? And at the church. And now all of a sudden we can do something to, number one, introduce them to Jesus, but also support them. Right down the road, not even a quarter mile, is Missionary Elementary. It's one of the poorest schools in the state of Michigan. It's under the poverty level, most of the kids that go there. And here's what's beautiful about it. We can open up our doors, and they can come right from there, and they can come hang out and play for a little bit. And we get to just minister to them, right? It's awesome. Let me show you one other thing. Last week I was driving to the offices. And as I was driving to the offices just past the mall, there was this family playing in the grass right there in the apartment area. And it was like God just simply said, that's why you need to put a park inside of it. That's why it needs an indoor play area. Because in the winter months, guess what? They're going to be able to do that. And they're going to be looking for things to do. And oftentimes they're going to get in trouble, or they're just going to be worn out and things will happen that we don't want to happen. So what could happen? There's so much. And that's what kind of we're going to lean into next week. This morning, would you stand with me? I want to pray. And we're just going to sing one final song. And then we'll get out of here. So, Father, I pray that today you would stir within our hearts this desire to obey. That, God, it feels oftentimes like we've been fishing all night and catching nothing. But today, God, you're saying, see things different, throw it into the right side, and see what might happen. And so today, God, we're taking up the net and we're going to toss it to the right because we know that, God, you're going to do more than we can ever ask or imagine. I pray that today in this room, that every heart and every life would know that everything that we do and what we want to do is about you. So if they're sitting in this room today and they don't have a relationship with you, I pray that you would meet them right where they're at. And God, their response would simply be, God, forgive me for not trusting you, for not knowing you. Forgive me of my sins. Wash my slate clean. I thank you for the cross. I thank you for resurrection. And I thank you for the life that you've planned for me to live from this point forward. Today is a new day, and you are doing a new thing. And so, God, we hold on to that, knowing that you are good. So, God, today we give you everything. And it's in Jesus' name we pray.